For joining us, and we begin here in the UK, where the race to choose the next leader of the Conservative Party and therefore the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom could be moving into its final stages. That's after former Prime Minister Boris Johnson withdrew from the contest on Sunday. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak is now the favourite to replace Liz Truss at 10 Downing Street. More than 200 out of 357 Tory MPs have now gone public with their support for either of the two remaining candidates. Rishi Sunak has the public backing of 177 MPs and 26 are supporting his rival Penny Mordaunt. After Johnson's withdrawal, several senior Tory MPs have now switched allegiance from Johnson to Sunak, including former Home Secretary Priti Patel, Michael Gove and current Cabinet Ministers James Cleverly and Nadhim Zahawi. If Mordaunt fails to gain the support of at least 100 Tory MPs, the contest could be over by later today, with Sunak declared as the winner. However, if Mordaunt does reach that threshold, there will be an indicative vote amongst Conservative MPs later on. Meanwhile, the opposition Labour Party has reiterated its call for a general election. The Scottish National Party, or SNP, is also echoing that call. Meanwhile, some people here in the capital, London, said they do now want to see Sunak taking over as Prime Minister.
I trust somebody who's let's go back to the competence word again. Yeah, I'd rather have Rishi back in office.
I just think it was chaotic when he was in charge, so I don't want to see that again. I got sick of watching the news and every night something new popping up, so we just need some stability right now.
Better than Boris. Yeah.
For more analysis on this story, we're joined live on the broadcast by Dr. Nigel Fletcher, who's a political historian at King's College in London. Dr. Fletcher, thanks very much for joining us again. If you could just walk us through Rishi Sunak, his political ideology, which wing of the party is he from exactly?
Hello, yeah. Well, it's actually getting quite difficult to ascribe labels to people in the Conservative Party at the moment. I think it's one of the extraordinary things we've seen over the past few months, really, with the two leadership elections we've now seen, is that the old fault lines that we're used to seeing between the sort of left and right of the party really don't apply as much as they previously did. So you had Brexit, of course, disrupting this sort of labelling quite significantly, with the sort of tribes developing around Leave and Remain. And that's sort of starting to be less important, because if it was on that basis, you've got two candidates here, Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt, both of whom backed the Leave side. So trying to work out sort of which wing of the party they're on, both of them quite clearly are economically quite on the right. Rishi Sunak, has in the past declared his admiration for Margaret Thatcher, and certainly is a low tax, small state Conservative. But equally, I think you can see other candidates in the leadership elections that we've had have had a similar approach. But during the leadership election, he was portrayed as being somehow on the left, that Liz Truss was the sort of right-wing Thatcherite candidate, and somehow Rishi Sunak is some sort of soft left-wing kind of candidate. It really is quite an extraordinary few months we've had, where some of these definitions don't seem to apply. But by any reasonable definition, he is a Brexiteer. He backed the Leave side, and he is an economic Thatcherite, essentially. He is somebody who believes in lower taxes and a smaller state. But he does also believe, and I think this is the crucial difference between him and Liz Truss that we saw earlier this summer, is that he also believes in sound money and keeping borrowing down.
And a lot of the talk at the moment about Penny Mordaunt is the fact that, yes, she is a former cabinet minister. She was defence secretary, but quite briefly. I mean, do you think she has the sort of experience needed to take on the very top job in British public life?
Well, I think that's one of the big questions that MPs will be considering at the moment, that they've just had a Prime Minister in Liz Truss who, on paper, had a very significant amount of cabinet experience. She'd been Foreign Secretary, she'd served in cabinet for longer continuously than anyone else, and yet she came unstuck very, very quickly. And I think they'll be quite concerned about having somebody like Penny Mordaunt, who has served in cabinet briefly. She was Defence Secretary and she's now been in cabinet as Leader of the House of Commons, but hasn't really had that experience in the top jobs. And I think that will create a lot of nervousness. Whereas Rishi Sunak, the public know him, and for 2 years he was Chancellor in a very difficult set of circumstances for the government. He is tested in that. And so I think of the two options, MPs will be looking at the fairly bleak economic picture ahead and thinking they need somebody who has that experience. They simply don't know that about Penny Mordaunt. She might be great, but they don't know that.
And we are due to get the count in terms of the votes from MPs from the Conservative Party in just over an hour's time. Thanks for that. That was Dr. Nigel Fletcher from King's College London. Well, let's cross live now to our correspondent Alex Isat, who's standing by here in London. Alex, let's just talk about Boris Johnson's withdrawal from the race on Sunday. How does that change the calculation in terms of the two remaining candidates now?
Well, there's a lot of talk about Boris Johnson coming back and being this great Prime Minister second time round, like his hero Churchill. He had said that he definitely did get those 100 plus votes, so he could have run if he wanted to go forward, but he decided that this was not the right time. Of course, as soon as he did suggest that he was no longer in the race, many people were thinking, right, well, that's it, Penny Mordaunt's going to straight up get all of the votes that potentially would have gone to Boris Johnson over Rishi Sunak. But we didn't see that happen. And we have slowly seen some more votes coming to Penny Mordaunt, but not as many as I think was really initially likely to happen. From what I've heard, though, that publicly she may have only been endorsed by people in 20-odd people, but privately behind closed doors, she's apparently getting to that 100 and she's already got 90. But it's whether or not that is going to be true, because at the moment we have seen some MPs have actively asked her to step down and move aside so that Rishi Sunak can make his way to become Prime Minister by the end of today. But at the moment we're still waiting for those official numbers to come out.
And Alex, just walk us through how the next few hours and potentially the next few days are going to work in terms of the leadership contest.
Of course, it all depends on if Penny Mordaunt gets those 100 backers today, because if she doesn't, then by 2 p.m. local time, we're going to see a new Prime Minister in Rishi Sunak, and he will be taking his time to decide about the fiscal statement, because obviously we have that coming up on October 31st. The new Prime Minister will have to say whether that's going to go ahead or not, or whether that will be pushed back. So we could see, if he does become Prime Minister by today, that we might be able to get a new statement, a new mini budget, and that OBR forecast will still be with us by potentially early next week. Of course, if Penny Mordaunt does get those 100 backers, then later today, then her and Rishi Sunak will be in another meeting by about 3 p.m. And then we will have this new debate. Another hustings is going to be coming at the end of this week. And then members, that over 180,000 members will be able to vote for who they want to go forward and be Prime Minister by Friday. Now, don't forget, last time that those members voted, they did vote for Liz Truss. So whether or not, when it comes to the membership vote, Rishi Sunak has them behind him or not, well, that'll be interesting to see, because he's gone through this once before and they didn't vote for him. So it will be whether or not they will change their mind in this time, and then by Friday we will have a new Prime Minister.
Thanks for that, Alex. That was Alex Isat live for us from central London. And just worth repeating there that in an hour and 20 minutes' time, we're going to get the figures in terms of how many MPs have supported Sunak or Mordaunt from Graham Brady, who is the chair of the 1922 Committee of Backbench Conservative MPs.